Baby Boomer fans, we are Jackie and Janine, the Pfeiffer sisters, and love to talk about the 1950s, inviting you to reminisce with us as we explore experiences of that decade. Grab your favorite malt or Green River, make sure you are wide awake, and get ready to be inspired about the 1950s. Welcome to the 1950s Fun Chat. Greetings, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today for this, our number 130 conversation with someone who either lived in the 1950s or whose life has been influenced by that decade. Or, you know what, Jackie, we've even opened this up to events that occurred in the 1950s and are probably still ongoing. So take it away from here because we have another exciting guest.
We do. And viewers, I'd like to have you watch that purple banner. www.whilethewindmillwatch.com is a very informative site that we hope that you go to see because it has things, information about where we might be speaking, where our vendors are, where our, and of course, I almost forgot the 1950s Fun Chat. You can see all of the previous ones up to there. Okay, look in the upper right-hand corner, please. You see that book, While the Windmill Watched, A Slice of Rural America in the 1950s. This is the book that was published in 2021, and it spurred this fun chat. You'll see a little white emblem on the bottom. That is because this little book was given the award that is the National Independent Press Award in the regional nonfiction category, and it was called the Distinguished Favorite. So the little book is really happy to see that little emblem on the front cover. On with the show. Mm-hmm. Our guest today is a multi-talented Tom Drake. He was born in 1946 into a family of 5 siblings and mostly raised in Amherst, Massachusetts, except for 2 years in Japan as a teenager. He graduated from Oberlin College, Oberlin, Ohio, in 1969, 68, pardon me, with a degree in history. My eyes here. Years later, in 1985, he obtained I'm sorry, I'm fumbling here, an AA degree from Spokane Community College in nursing. Tom is musically talented in the fiddle, the violin, and voice. Over the years, he has shared his talents in groups and bands and choirs. After working at Eastern State Hospital in Medical Lake, Washington for 26 years, he retired in 2012. He and his wife, Bev, have one son, Colin. Bev lost her battle with cancer in 2007. Leslie Waters now completes his life. They were married in 2010. And if you might want to check on Leslie Waters, she is Fun Chat 123. Very talented lady. So, Tom, we welcome you to the 1950s Fun Chat.
Yes.
Glad you are here. So let's begin by asking you to relay some of your fond memories of the 1950s decade. And you can choose from a variety of topics: a Little League baseball, church, having a relationship with a twin brother, or touch on them all.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It's flattering to be called multi-talented. I really think of Leslie as the multi-talented one. Grew up, born in a suburb of Chicago, and spent a couple years in South Carolina before moving to Western Massachusetts, to Amherst, Massachusetts, where my father was a agronomist with the University of Massachusetts.
Ah.
So when we first moved there, it was a fairly small university. But then during the 50s and 60s, most of the land-grant colleges in the United States just got huge, including the University of Massachusetts. And so it was a fairly small town until the 60s, and when it became much bigger. So let me hold up a picture of my fam.
Yes.
Let's see if this can.
Okay. Yes.
Here we are. It's not a very good picture.
Was that at Easter time?
I think it's an Easter picture, and
Uh-huh.
it's probably in the early 60s.
Okay.
And that's the house that I grew up in, a big 3-story New England house.
Yeah.
And here's my graduation pictures of, notice my twin brother on one side and me on the other.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Different, same glasses.
same glasses.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Yeah,
It appears that you were identical twins.
no, we're
Oh,
not.
you okay?
In
And so,
fact, of the 5 children, we're probably temperamentally the least alike. Can you figure that?
That
Yeah.
happens. Yep.
yes, and
Well, continue on then.
okay.
So
Please.
College Town was a fascinating place to be in because there were horticultural shows, there were sporting events, there were cultural activities of all kinds, movie series. I remember my mother and I went to the Japanese director Kurosawa's movies, which I never would have seen probably if I hadn't been, in a university area, and lectures, and plus going to high school with a lot of really talented, smart kids. So
Mhm.
it was a great place to grow up.
Is there something special about growing up in that time of your life in the East? We know what it was like for us in North Dakota and the Midwest, and we often hear of people noting similarities about their lives, no matter where they grew up in the 1950s. But I'm curious to know about what was life like on the East Coast for you as a child?
It probably didn't. Well, it wasn't rural, but the 50s were very much a time of families and church,
Mm-hmm.
and school, and for my brother and me, my twin brother and me, not so much my older brother, sports. So it's probably somewhat similar, although we didn't have horses like you guys.
Mhm. Yeah.
That's okay. That's okay.
I think we had a cat or two.
Okay.
I don't think we ever had a dog.
Did you ride bikes with
Yeah.
your neighbor kids, that
We
type of
rode bikes and we used them in our paper routes. We
Uh-huh.
would sling a paper bag over the seat, and sometimes even two. And at one time, I think I had 3 different routes. I had an afternoon route, a Sunday morning route, and a morning route, an afternoon route, and a Sunday morning route. And the Sunday morning route was very difficult because as Christmas time approached, the New York Times would be huge. It would be
Mhm.
would be an inch and a half thick, full of advertisements. But it was, you wanted to be a paper boy around Christmas time and New Year's because frequently you got nice tips.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Mhm.
And this was all with the same paper that you delivered, or were there various papers?
Various papers, the Boston papers, New York papers, and the Springfield Republican, Springfield, Massachusetts.
Okay. Did you ever have anyone once you threw the paper up on the porch or on the stoop? Did you ever have any homeowner come out and get upset because of how it was received by them after you'd thrown it?
I don't remember throwing them. I think we placed them inside the screen door. I think we were pretty careful. Yeah.
Okay.
But I know throwing them in a plastic bag is the way it's usually done now.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
If it's done that way at all. If
Yeah.
there is delivery,
It's probably done by mail mostly.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Were there at that time out there, other than paper boys to a way of getting the paper, were there newspapers, locations, vendors who would sell those papers as well?
Yes. And in high school, I worked behind the counter in a store in the central part of Amherst that served both Amherst College and UMass, and had papers and stationery and little kitschy things that you could take back from both colleges to home if you were visiting, things like that. Called Hastings Store, and it lasted for decades until just the last few years.
Good for them. Good for them.
It was a fixture.
You bet. And people in the town depend on those fixtures.
You know, this was a classic town that had a New England Commons, you know, a big sort of park area that had churches and stores around it. And on one end was Amherst College, and a couple miles away was the University of Massachusetts.
Yes, yes.
Cool.
And then in the summer, there would be a fair that always came with Ferris wheels and rides, various concessions.
Were there local competitions, baking competitions, or crop competitions associated with that fair, or livestock?
Not livestock so much. I'm trying to remember if there were like 4-H type competitions, but I don't remember that much. I mostly remember the rides. You know, that was the big.
Did you have a favorite?
Well, I like the Ferris wheel, and I like the ones that went around sideways and then sort of tilted.
Yes,
the tilt-a-whirl.
It pressed you back by centrifugal force.
Oh,
those were like.
Jackie and I didn't very often get to go to a carnival, but boy, I remember us riding the tilt-a-whirl when we got an opportunity. That and the merry-go-round.
That's the name. I'd forgotten it.
Yes.
That's it.
It was fun.
So tell us about the time you spent in Japan and how that came about.
Yeah, that was a very unusual, interesting part of all of our lives. So when Japan opened to the West, kind of around the time of our Civil War, they started an exchange program in various places, and Hokkaido University on the Northern Island was one of them. And so there were exchanges between what was then Massachusetts Agricultural College and Hokkaido University for years until I think the First World War. And then, of course, when Japan militarized between the wars, it stopped. But in 1957, my family and another family started this exchange again. And I think it went on for decades after us. So when we first went to Sapporo, which is the biggest city in Hokkaido, the Northern Island, there was a English-speaking air base school about an hour bus ride away. But then it closed down. And so my older brother and twin brother and I went to Kobe to a boarding school, Canadian Academy, for 2 years until we came back home.
So was your father was doing something professionally with the other university?
Yes. He was teaching agronomy, I think mostly dealing with forage crops. But I remember we had corn plots that all three boys went out to hoe, to keep the weeds out. There were these pithy expressions from my dad, who grew up on a farm in southern Indiana. One of them was "can't, never did anything." You remember? Did you come across that?
Never did anything.
What did that mean?
That meant you can't say "can't" because "can't" never gets anything done.
Oh.
My dad was kind of the taskmaster, and I think I learned stick-to-itiveness from him, and from my mother I learned, I think, the art of conversation. That when you're in a room, everybody needs to have a chance to talk if there's a group of people, and that if it's one-on-one, it's like a tennis match. You have to bat it back and forth. Very good skills from both parents.
A chat.
Yes. How are the Japanese families located as far as the potential host families in this exchange that you had?
We lived independently, but we lived in a neighborhood, and my youngest sister, Cynthia, was only a few months old when we went over there, and so she grew up completely bilingual. And I wish I could find a picture of her in a little kimono, because she would go around to neighbors' houses where a blonde-haired, blue-eyed, jabbering Japanese kid was just accepted
Cool.
wholeheartedly. She doesn't remember any of it now, and is a little miffed at times when we want to talk about it, because she doesn't have any memory of it.
Sure.
But does she still have the language skills somewhere?
No.
Oh.
No. Yeah. Alas.
Yes.
Boy, I often wonder what would have happened if my parents had thrust us into a Japanese school. We would have suffered academically, but wow, we would have probably picked up a lot of language. I mean,
Right.
we knew by the time we left how to get around on public transportation and order food at a restaurant, but not enough to really hold a conversation. My mother learned more. Yeah.
Was she a stay-at-home mom?
Yes, and except when she tried to substitute teach when we were in high school, which was profoundly embarrassing.
Oh.
For you.
For us.
And what subject matter was she teaching?
I think English.
Okay.
That was her major.
All right.
She had started at Beloit College, and then in the Depression had transferred to Purdue, where she, I think, pursued a home economics degree, thinking that there would be more job opportunities, and met my dad, and the rest is history.
There is a job opportunity right there with him.
That had to be interesting for them to grow up in the Midwest and then to move east. Do you recall how they adapted to that culture change?
I think my dad always had a bit of a chip on his shoulder, partly for being a Midwesterner, but also being, an Aggie, in this, highly academic for-college environment. I mean, there was Smith College close by, and Mount Holyoke, and Amherst, UMass. But he always used to say, they like to eat.
Yep.
Yes.
And we still do.
Yeah. I mean, he had been at Purdue maybe on the tail end of one of the more successful agricultural revolutions in this country, which was hybrid corn, which you're probably familiar with. And I remember much later when Rachel Carson's book Silent Spring came out, I think in the early 60s, he was very upset by that, because his feeling was it did not give credibility, it did not give credit where credit should have been given. And that if we ignored pests, we might all starve, which of course was a bit of an overreaction, but I can see why he felt that way.
I want to go back to your time in Japan. Did you have favorite Japanese foods that you can recall?
Yes. I never liked sushi then, but Leslie has gotten me interested in sushi now. I liked fried rice, and I liked the various soups that they would make with noodles, and you hold them up and you kind of slurp them in, with a lot of sound effects, and that's very, very accepted in a Japanese restaurant.
Cool.
Were they open? Were your Japanese friends open to eating American foods, or did your mom even make American foods?
Yes, my mom made American foods.
Mhm.
Uh-huh.
And we would have Japanese professors over sometimes.
Uh-huh.
We also had a Japanese maid um, who who would sort of laugh behind her hand when the baby's sister would be complaining about my parents in Japanese.
Oh,
So no one else but
Knew.
Tokita-san and my sister could understand what she was saying.
Mm-hmm.
I can still remember sort of
little
tittering.
secret.
Cute.
Yeah.
Does your sister remember that?
No,
Oh, okay.
she doesn't remember any of that era at all.
That is interesting.
Alas.
How old was she when you were there?
A few months.
She was about 3 when we left.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah, so very early times for her.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, do you suppose being around all those universities helped spur your interest in politics, or was that something at home that you received, or what?
Very much, very much. I would always in this place where I, work behind the cash register. I would be reading the New York Times Week in Review and various
Mhm.
columnists, and I was very interested in that kind of thing.
Mhm.
Still am.
Mhm.
And in your nursing career, did that occur later then in your life?
Mhm.
Yes. So I moved here in 1973, 50 years ago, and started a community with 2 couples. Byron, my neighbor, and I are the 2 originals that are still living here on the property of the 2 couples. And worked various jobs, but then the rock quarry on Highway 395, right in Addy, across from that big church, went belly up in 1980, and a couple friends were nurses, and were saying, "Hey, they're always trying to get us to work overtime. Why don't you think about nursing school?" And so I did, and absolutely loved it. Partly because it was getting back into a academic environment again. I mean, I would go to the library and pursue things like, why does the stomach not digest itself? And, well, anyway,
tell us.
yeah, things like that, and had a good time there. And then I really was interested in of the various clinical rotations during nursing school. There was a neurology floor up in Sacred Heart that really got my interest. But there weren't any job openings for months and months and months when I was applying in the summer of I think it was '85. But there was one out at Eastern State Hospital, and they, a man with a license, you're hired.
Yeah. Well, tell her what Eastern State Hospital is. It's a special hospital.
Eastern State Hospital is the state psychiatric hospital on this side of the state. The other one is over near Tacoma and is much bigger.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So
what then you got this job there at the Eastern, and what led you to, besides you have a job, what led you to staying there? Did you really find that was a good niche for you?
Initially, I didn't, but then an opportunity came up to work on the one little tiny medical floor that they had, where we would, there were IVs and NG tubes. There was a little bit of actual nursing stuff that went on, not just psych stuff. And that kind of kept me there. I was pretty good at putting in IVs, but what I had a knack for was de-escalation. And I didn't realize it at first, but the alarm would go off and the rumble of people from various wards would be going down the hallway, and I'd enter the door, and sometimes the staff would be cowering behind the nurses' station, and there'd be this very, upset patient. And I don't know, usually I was able to talk them down, maybe because I could be the good cop because I was coming from somewhere else,
You think
You have a calming voice, and that transmitted to them.
You think that's it?
Do you think the patients respected you more as the fact that you were a man there trying to help them?
I don't know. Oftentimes women were more successful with de-escalation than anyone else. It just depended. I only got hit once, and I should have known better, because this guy was kind of known for waiting until your back was turned.
Mm.
There's a man named, I'll just use his first name, Wilbur.
Okay.
And so I was passing meds, and I gave him his meds, and he refused, and I said fine, and turned my back to put the little cup back on the rolling cart, and bam, he slugged me from behind.
Whoa.
And I have to confess, I kind of lost it, and I wanted to slam that guy up against the wall, but didn't.
Yeah.
But that experience made me more empathetic with staff that would get bit and slapped, Yeah, but anyway, your role as a male RN there, when there's a takedown, is trying to slow it down, because people get hurt by each other, not necessarily the patient. When there's a big pig pile, there's a lot of weight, and so you try to minimize the amount of force that's needed. Anyway, that's the Eastern State Hospital. 26 years.
So when you said you and another family started a community. What's it take to start a community? What do you do? How do you go about that?
Well, the era was the Back to the Land movement, and we had lived in Seattle in a house that was owned by the city and being rented out for not very much, because it was slated to become a park. Now it's a Frisbee golf park up near Northgate in the north part of Seattle, and we started looking for land, the two couples, up in the Skagit Valley and even over in the San Juan Islands. And, property values there were already out of sight for us. So then a mutual friend knew people in Onion Creek, which is an area north of Colville. So in the summer of '73, we came over and stayed with this family for a little bit and started looking for land, and almost bought a place up in Onion Creek. But the elderly couple that wanted to move to town wanted cash, and we didn't have that much, even though it was only $20,000, as I recall. Still,
what year was that?
1973.
Oh.
200 something dollars an acre. Yeah.
And so how did you and this other couple connect? Did you know them from before?
One person, Gail, was the common link between everybody. And Gail had met the other woman, Ileana, in Baltimore when I was teaching school the year after I graduated there. And Gail came out for a month or two, because there was a school schedule where there was a month off in the middle of the year. So she was also at Oberlin College, but a year behind me. So she came out and met Ileana there, and she also knew Byron, so we moved to Seattle, Gail and I, and then found out about this house and started living there. And then Byron joined us on a big motorcycle trip that went up to Alaska because he knew Gail. And then Ileana came out and they got together, and the rest is history.
Oh my.
So you lived off the land then?
Well, yeah, we had gardens, but other Back to the Land friends were much closer to the land and actually probably grew more of their food than we did. You know, we had jobs. We planted trees, drove school bus.
You had electricity and running water.
No, we didn't.
All right.
We didn't have electricity or running water for, let's see, I think we got running water the first year, but it might have frozen in the winter. And we didn't get power for several years, and we didn't get phones for several more years after that. We had party lines for quite a while. Yeah.
That's just amazing what you did. You're so brave.
We're young. You know,
you're young, and you said, "Let's do it."
People can put up with a lot of stuff.
Did you get your water from a river or a creek, or did you have a well?
We have a very reliable spring, which is up on one corner of the property, and we've gradually developed that. And so that's our water source for 3 of the 4 households. And there's a well near the creek that's the source for the 4th household.
Okay. And then, other than your individual homes there, did you establish any kinds of businesses in that community, or school or church?
We still have a sign that says berries for sale. You know, we were gonna have a you pick raspberry farm. You know.
Okay.
Yeah. No,
but no, huh?
Right.
Okay.
You know, many communities do have sort of a religious connection, but we never did.
Did you have pets? A dog?
There's been dogs. There's been cats.
Yeah.
There was a pig for a while. There was a horse for a while. Now we're down to 1 dog and 1 cat.
Okay.
And the cat mostly stays at one house, but the dog goes wherever the 2 children are.
Yeah. Does everyone feed it?
No, not everyone feeds it, but everyone pets it, and you know.
Okay.
So what I'm going to ask about next is this phrase: "We are products of our times." So that kind of what you've been talking to us about is the example of that.
Yeah, the
freedom.
whole back to the land thing.
Yeah,
that's definitely being a product of the times.
Yeah.
Yeah. We were pretty sketchy there for a while. I remember Byron saying something like, I wonder if he would admit to it now, but he said something, I think we need to learn to live without money. You know? Yeah.
Was he going to work then for whatever else he needed if he couldn't grow it himself? Or in a barter situation? Or how would he do that?
He eventually taught math and was the band director at the small community public school in Summit Valley that has about 60 kids, and did that for years and years until he retired. And then his daughter, Ella, went there. Ella, who now lives here and is raising her 2 boys, age 7 and 5, here in one of the houses with her husband, Nathan, who is a rural mail carrier.
Oh.
And she is one of our librarians. You know, these people were educated. They just wanted to put their education aside for a bit and see what they could do without it. Sounds like.
That's true. We were all educated.
You're all educated.
In that time that this young guy wanted to consider not using money, did he have a car or a form of transportation that required upkeep?
Yeah, we had pretty rough looking cars. There was a VW Bug for a while. I mean, everybody had one of those.
Yes. Did you have a bus, a VW bus?
We got good at rebuilding VW engines. We had a VW bus, classic, of course.
Yes.
You know, hippies, VW bus.
Yeah.
You know, and then pickups of various kinds. One of my successes this year is getting all the junk cars off the place and taken up to the steel recycler in Kettle Falls.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Yes. Big
6.
job.
6.
6.
Good for you.
Yep.
Yeah.
For you.
Because there's a sense that of us, older generation here, that we want to leave it in a fairly good condition for whoever comes next.
Right. Actually.
Yes. Well, Tom, we are already nearing the end of our chat. It's gone quick.
No.
Yeah. Do you have anything more or any wisdom you'd like to share with us?
Yeah.
Or even non-wisdom?
I would say that no matter how horrible the world seems, it's getting slightly better as we go along, year by year. So keep hope. Keep hope.
Okay. Wise words. Thank you so much for being our guest today.
Viewers, thank you for inviting me.
Yes.
You're welcome. Our pleasure.
Jackie, how about wrapping it up today?
Okay, just a couple things, and that is, viewers, look at the red subscribe button and touch that, as well as the blue thumbs up button. And tell your friends, even your family, about the 1950s Fun Chat. So until next time, toodaloo.
Bye.